The point here was that the tit for tat that takes place means that we might actually not be talking to each other, that we need to actually open the dialogue so that we talk to each other, that we are coming to the point where the tensions have become so elevated that even when a hand is being extended so that one country is reaching out, we might not see that hand because things had become so tense. It's important that those conversations take place. There are time limits that had been set. Some tariffs are supposedly off the table for a period of 90 days. It's ticking every day. The days are becoming fewer. And in an environment where every country is negotiating bilaterally, these things could actually take a lot of time, and meaning that the uncertainty might be with us for long, and that there was a call that says that you have got to actually be de-escalating, and the way to de-escalate is to actually be engaged in dialogue.
That was your session. That's why I'm giving it to you. But let me just add one point. The general principle of rejecting protectionism and commitment to multinational trade system and a rules-based system was broadly the main principle accepted in the meeting.
Thank you. I'll take one more in the room. I've got a few questions online. Please go ahead.
I'm Katie McMahon from Octus. My question is about the G20 and its role as co-chair of the Global Sovereign Debt Roundtable. I want to ask, to what extent is the G20 worried about liquidity crises and solvency crises for low-income countries with high levels of debt? A three-pillar approach has been recommended to help some countries facing liquidity strains. Has any step been taken to implement that framework? And is it still the case that you think that liquidity is more of an issue as compared with solvency?
Yeah, as I indicated, that key among the things we're dealing with is debt sustainability. And critical in that discussion is that a number of countries not only face that, some of them are facing balance of payment problem. I don't know whether the IMF gave us a figure. So the issue is, how do we improve the current common framework to deal with that question? So it is a challenge. That's why people were raising that a key principle is what we must discuss. How do we make sure that these countries have got access to affordable and concessional capital, and therefore deal with the challenge of the cost of capital and how these people access the cost at which they access that capital. So broadly, there's agreement, and we've therefore developed a framework to the extent of saying what lessons can we draw from the case studies that are going to be published of those countries that have gone through the common framework.
Thank you. I've got a question online from Hilary Jaffe from the Business Day. Her question is to the Governor. The Governor suggested this week that the G20 processes needed to be streamlined and a focus on fewer priorities. There was also a suggestion to separate the finance and the Sherpa tracks and possibly establish a permanent secretariat. Is there any traction with the proposals that you've put forward? What reforms to G20 processes have been discussed in the meeting, if at all? There is another question. Which is, okay.
South Africa made a very conscious decision that with respect to the finance track, we are not going to add new items. And the reason was very simple. What happens with the G20 is that every presidency adds an item. there isn't a mechanism to subtract, or where we would say this is now bedded and we must actually have it behind us. And one of the things that had been coming through the conversation was that we launched the regulatory reform agenda in the aftermath of the great financial crisis. And that regulatory reform agenda, at the heart of it, was Basel III. And that as we were implementing Basel III, there were refinements that were taking place, and that we need to finalize the implementation so that we give certainty to the regulated sector, something that in this country is called the Basel III endgame, so that we know we have done that. And the reforms that have so far been implemented have proved to have been very, very relevant, because the financial system is much more resilient than it was before the global financial crisis. The G20 started, the genesis of the G20 was with the finance track. And what had happened had been now, the G20 includes lots of other tracks. The problem that you have is that the other tracks end up either finding themselves in the finance track, or some of the finance tracks end up being discussed elsewhere. And that becomes a problem, and we needed to streamline. So Minister Godongwana here was referring earlier on to things that prevented the finance track from having a communique. And the reason was not very difficult to find. Things that are supposed to be discussed at the Sherpa track ended up coming into the finance minister's track, and that clouds the discussions that the finance track actually has. So this year, for the South African presidency, in the finance track, for example, we decided we will have a focus with respect to cross-border payments. And we picked up cross-border payments for a reason. And it was because the cost of remittances in the African continent had proved to be higher than many corridors elsewhere in the world. But importantly was that there was political commitment to bringing down the cost of cross-border payments, because under the Saudi presidency, that was adopted at the Leaders' Summit. And we decided that is what we are going to focus on, and we are going to finalize that. In the process, though, the Sherpa's track was discussing the issue of the cost of capital, for which the finance track said this belongs with the finance track, and that is how it got translated into the finance track, and that is what the minister was actually referring to. So we've streamlined the agenda. We didn't add anything from the finance track, because we were very clear we needed to finalize what is actually on the G20's agenda.
Thank you. I have one last question also from Hilary Jaffe from the Business Day. Can you tell us more about the high-level panel on Africa chaired by Trevor Manuel, what proposal it has offered for the G20 finance track?
He's sitting at the back, he's probably following me that I'm not misrepresenting him.
Can you just... Minister, I think please go ahead.
Yeah, do you want to take it, Trevor? Yeah, he must take it.
The chair of the panel.
The chair of the panel, he must himself tell us what he's doing.
Can I ask you to stand, please?
Thank you very much. I was minding my own business, and Minister Godongwana thought that I should chair the panel in Africa. We have 24 panelists drawn from primarily across the African continent, 21 from across the African continent, from the 4 language groups, Anglophone, Francophone, Lusophone, and Arabic, so that we can produce a product that feels African, not exclusively because some of the panelists are from outside of the continent. The terms of reference are clear. The big challenge that confronts us is that we must have a product that we can hand to heads of state at the end of August. We must complete our work by the end of August. And so we've developed a chairperson's framework to which panelists are now contributing. It's a fairly rich process of work running. I'm pretty sure that we will have a reasonable product, not a complete product, but a reasonable product by the time that we have to hand it over to heads of state via the G20 formal process at a ministerial level. There is a sense amongst panelists who met last night that if the work, it's unlikely that the work will be concluded. We will then continue, perhaps under the guise of UNECA, to ensure that some of those strands of work are carried forward and Africa can own the process of its policy direction. Many of the issues that were raised by the Governor and yourself, Minister, are included in the process, and we'd also probably take forward the World Bank theme on jobs as a fundamentally important issue going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. We do have time for one more question, Minister. Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Kemi Oshikoya from the Africa Bazaar magazine, and I'm sorry I'm late. I was attending another event. My question to you is, as we know in Africa, the informal sector is a big sector. And oftentimes when we count the GDP, that sector is left out. So given that this is the first time that the G20, which is the 20 biggest economic in the world, is being hosted in Africa, what are you doing to bring this sector as the finance minister and central bank governor to make sure the informal sector are now brought into the regular sector? Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we've got we've got no specific sectoral focus on informal sector. However, there are different expertise which could help us formulate a proposition in this regard. I don't know whether anybody is giving the expert panel some contribution so that they could put that into as part of the contribution. To me, that would be useful. We know the extent of the problem. For instance, the ILO said today in the meeting, that's why I'm saying we're drawing it from a number of people. The ILO made the point that, I don't know how accurate that information is, that about 84% of employment on the African continent is from that sector. So clearly the ILO will contribute inside, and there's a panel of experts but as I indicated, we don't have a sectoral focus on that issue, but I think it's an important point we need to be taking into account. I mean, in South Africa, some of my colleagues in Treasury were saying we complain about unemployment, but if you look at the formal employment, as a percentage of the labor force, we're almost the same side as other countries. Our problem is the informal sector, which we've not captured properly. So I agree with you, it's a matter that needs attention.
Thank you very much. That concludes our press conference. Thank you very much for joining us. And that's it. Thank you.